please hit that subscribe button. Hey everybody, better suited to win the Stanley Cup this season. If you are new to the channel, Washington Capitals, the Boston Bruins.
Locked on and he scored! And we're live. Hey everybody, so we've talked about the best defensive teams in the NHL. Now let's go ahead and look at the worst defensive teams in the NHL. Before we start, I just quickly want to remind everyone to please hit that like button and give this video a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, to please subscribe, follow along for all my hockey content. Both of those things greatly help out the channel and are very much appreciated. All right, so the worst defensive teams in the NHL, and I think everybody knows who number one is going to be. They are, if you watched my videos yesterday, they are also the worst offensive team in the NHL. They are just straight up the worst team in the NHL, the Detroit Red Wings. And I'm not saying that to bash on the Red Wings or make their fans mad. It's got to be really tough to be a Red Wings fan at this point. But they are an all-time bad team, and I think their point total to this point in the season shows that they are just really bad. They're giving up 3.88 goals per game. Almost 4 goals a game are going into Detroit's net. I mean, that is just absolutely brutal. And there's a big gap between Detroit and everyone else. And at number 2, second worst defensive team, the New Jersey Devils, 3.51 goals against per game. They're giving up a ton of goals as well. This has been what has sunk their season. New Jersey was a team that really didn't, we thought had some potential going into this year with the additions of P.K. Subban and Wayne Simmons and drafting Jack Hughes. This was a team we really thought had some potential. And could possibly be a playoff team this year, and that's just not been the case at all. They're giving up over 3.5 goals a game, and it's because their team defense and goaltending has not been good enough, and that's really sunk their whole season. At number 3, we have the Ottawa Senators giving up 3.33 goals against per game. Ottawa, we knew going into the season wasn't going to be great. I actually think that Ottawa's been better than most of us expected at the start of this season. They've won more games than I thought they would, and they have not been the worst team in the league. That goes to Detroit. But still, Ottawa is struggling across the board, and they should be with that roster. They've got a very young team that is certainly deep in the rebuilding phase and not ready yet. Number 4, we have the San Jose Sharks, one of the biggest, probably the biggest disappointment this season. 3.29 goals against per game. They spent all this money on Erik Karlsson. Brent Burns is making a ton of money. Those are very offensive defensemen. They happen to be bottom 10 in the league in offense as well, but they certainly don't help out a whole lot defensively. Their goaltending this year has been atrocious. This has just been a disaster of a season for San Jose. They're bad offensively, they're bad defensively, they're bad in general, and they were a conference final team last year, and now they are near the bottom of the Western Conference. At number 5, we have the Minnesota Wild at 3.28 goals against per game. Minnesota I picked to finish last in the Central Division this year. I still think that that's a very real possibility. I know they're pretty close in points with Nashville and Chicago and Winnipeg, and that central bottom of the Central is all pretty stacked right now. I still think there's a good chance Minnesota ends up being the last place team. And they're not getting high level goaltending from Devin Dubnyk. Their team defense as a whole leaves a lot to be desired, and they are one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And that is not good if you're the Minnesota Wild. Number 6, we have the New York Rangers. Now, the Rangers were one of those teams that are one of the 10 best offensive teams in the league that we talked about yesterday. However, they are not in a playoff spot and not even really close to a playoff spot because they are giving up 3.27 goals per game. And they score a lot, but they give up a ton of goals, and that's not a winning formula at the NHL level. And they are not scoring enough to outweigh how many goals they give up. So they've not been able to win enough games to keep themselves in a playoff position. And There's been a lot of things that I like about the Rangers this year. I think they've improved in a lot of areas. One area that they certainly need to get better at going forward is definitely just defense in general and keeping the puck out of their own goal. At number 7, we're actually tied number 6. We have the Florida Panthers with 3.27 goals against per game. And now Florida is the number 1 offensive team in the league. So they're giving up a lot of goals, but they are scoring so many, almost 4 goals a game, that it does outweigh it. And Florida is really the only example where the offense is good enough to outweigh a really, really bad team defense. And, Florida is able to hold a playoff position at this point. It's still no guarantee that they make it. There's still 2 months left, and there are certainly other teams there that could take that spot. But man, Florida, not good defensively. That's been an issue for them all year. Sergei Bobrovsky has not performed like an elite goaltender. Everything defensively there needs work. They're just lucky that they have such a high-powered offense. They're able to kind of outweigh those defensive problems a little bit. Number 8, we have the team that might be coming for Florida's playoff spot, the Toronto Maple Leafs, giving up 3.26 goals per game. This has been an ongoing issue for Toronto for years now. We know that they're built offensively with guys like John Tavares and Austin Matthews and William Nylander and Mitch Marner, and they're built to score goals. But man, this defense year in and year out just isn't good enough. And they're not going to win in the playoffs if this defense doesn't get better. 3.26 goals per game. You are one of the 10 worst defensive teams in the league. You cannot win in the playoffs like that. And it just, every year it's the same thing with Toronto. And now this year, they might not even make the playoffs. How crazy does that sound? If you talk to someone in September and said Toronto's not going to make the playoffs this year, they would have laughed in your face. Now there's a very real chance that Toronto doesn't make the playoffs this year. They are outside of a playoff spot right now at the end of January. That is a problem. But anyway, we'll see if they can get it together. But right now, Toronto's defense is not very good. At number 9, we have the Nashville Predators at 3.25 goals against per game. And this one, man, for all the past 5 years, basically, where Nashville's been a legitimate contending team, one of the best teams in the Western Conference, their whole identity's been defense. It's all been about the team defense. It's been about Pekka Rinne being an elite goaltender. It's about having this elite top 4 of D-core. It's about just all about playing great defensively and keeping the puck out of their net. And whether the offense was there or not, it didn't seem to matter. Nashville found ways to win games. This year has been a disaster for the Nashville Predators, and the defense is why. How, again, going into this season, how many people would have thought that Nashville would be one of the worst defensive teams in the league? I don't think very many, and that's really what's killed them this season and why it's looking now very, very likely that they will not be making the playoffs. And at number 10, we have the Montreal Canadiens giving up 3.14 goals against per game. It's another one of those years for Montreal where I don't know what fans that think that this team's going to make the playoffs see in this team. To me, the Montreal Canadiens over the past couple of years have been the epitome of mediocrity. They're not bad enough to be really, really bad, but they're not a playoff team. They're one of those teams that's going to finish every year like right outside the playoff picture, and they're just the average, mediocre, middle of the league type team, and it's not good enough, and they're giving up too many goals this year, and they don't have a high-powered offense. They don't have a lot of big-time goal scorers there. They don't have somebody who's going to rip off 40 goals a year. They're kind of a offense by committee, everybody chip in type team. For those kinds of teams to win, they have to be really good defensively, and Montreal has not been really good defensively. So those are the 10 worst defensive teams to this point in the NHL season. The Detroit Red Wings, the New Jersey Devils, the Ottawa Senators, the San Jose Sharks, the Minnesota Wild, the New York Rangers, the Florida Panthers, Toronto Maple Leafs, Nashville Predators, and Montreal Canadiens. And if you notice, one one of those 10 worst teams defensively in the NHL are currently in a playoff spot, and that is the Florida Panthers, who happen to be the best offensive team in the NHL. So in the case of Florida, so far, the great offense has been able to outweigh the terrible defense and keep them in a playoff position and let them win enough games to be in a playoff position. But that is only the case this year with the top offensive team. All of these other 9 of the worst defensive teams are outside the playoffs right now. And if you remember to the other video, the best defensive teams, all 10 of the best defensive teams are in a playoff spot at this point. So defense wins championships. Defense wins games at the NHL level. Yes, you have to be able to score somewhat, but you can easily outweigh low scoring with having a great defense. Whereas trying to go the other way and outweigh a bad defense with great scoring really does not work out nearly as well. And so far, Florida is the only team able to do it this season and be good enough to be a playoff team. Other than that, these teams with bad defenses and that are giving up a lot of goals are not playoff material. And I think it just goes to show that when it comes down to it, in the grand scheme of things, defense is more important than offense in the NHL, and the numbers are showing that. All the good defensive teams are in the playoffs. Most of the good offensive teams are in the playoffs. A lot of these teams are good at both. But if you're bad defensively, if you're one of the bottom teams defensively, your chances of being in the playoffs are very, very slim. And it's going to take an elite offense to outweigh that. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you guys soon.